Namaste, my friends, and welcome back to Spiritual Intelligence. So as promised, today I'm going to be revealing what I believe is an invaluable resource for spiritual ascension and inner healing, which is something that I call the Ascension Spiral, which explains the 4 levels of inner healing. And so this episode will likely become a sort of hallmark episode in this series that you'll refer back to many times. We're going to be building upon what we discussed and learned last week in episode 9 on the 4 bodies of consciousness, and using that as the whole foundation for understanding how the Ascension Spiral works. So if you haven't watched that episode yet, please do so before watching this one, or you may have a tough time following along. What I hope that this tool will provide you with is a more comprehensive understanding of the 4 levels of inner healing that we move through, or spiral through, as we attempt to heal ourselves. Oftentimes, because we don't understand that there are multiple levels to inner healing, we get stuck in one of the levels and just spiral around and around for a very long time before finally moving to the next level. And so again, this tool will provide you with a simple roadmap to not only understand where you are in your healing process, but what practices will facilitate a smooth transition through each of the 4 levels of healing. So I'd like to invite you to join me for this 10th episode of Spiritual Intelligence as we learn about the Ascension Spiral. So the first thing I want to highlight here is that healing is not linear, in the sense that we may often have to return again and again, many times, to the same trigger before it's fully and completely transmuted into light. And when this happens, we often have a tendency to think that it means we're failing at healing. We think that if we're doing things correctly, we should just heal everything in one foul swoop. If only it were that simple, right? Although this does sometimes happen, it is the rare exception and not the rule. And this is because we do not heal in straight lines, but in spirals, because we are multi-dimensional beings, which means that our traumas and blockages can affect us at multiple levels of our beingness, which means that we have to move through each of these levels in order to fully release these blockages. So this is where we get into our discussion from last week on the 4 bodies of consciousness. These 4 bodies represent the 4 levels of our being, and therefore the 4 levels that we can be blocked at and experience healing in. So let's quickly review these 4 bodies from our last episode and start to see how they make up the 4 levels of the Ascension Spiral. In yogic philosophy, there are 4 bodies or states of consciousness which we experience at any given time. The first is the gross body, which represents the waking state. This is called Jagrat in Sanskrit. The second is the subtle body, which represents the dream state. This state is called Svapna in Sanskrit. The third body is called the causal body, which represents the state of emptiness or deep sleep. The word for this state in Sanskrit is Sushupti. And finally, we have the 4th state, the Great-Causal body, which represents pure awareness or the transcendent state, called Turiya in Sanskrit. So when we experience any kind of trauma in life, it echoes through all 4 of the bodies of consciousness. And so here is a simple map of the Ascension Spiral, looking from the top down, where the red lines represent our negatively polarized energy, and the blue lines represent our positively polarized energy. As the positive and negative push and pull on one another in our energy field to fight for supremacy, we appear to spiral back and forth between positive and negative. And so the first level of healing on the Ascension Spiral is the gross or physical level. This is when we are not even aware that we have a blockage yet and are simply living out that imbalance as if it was part of our identity. It might be insecurity, short-temperedness, anxiety, or anything else, but we believe it just to be a part of who we are, rather than a distortion within our energy field. This is where the spiral is very tight, and most people spiral around and around the gross level for dozens of human lifetimes before ever becoming aware that these aspects of themselves represent unhealed traumas and distortions in their energy. Our blockages are signaled to us first at the gross level through intense and painful emotions. And so to become fully aware of the nature of any blockage through the emotions that it releases represents the first level of healing. And this can be called gross purification. Once emotions become a wake-up call to heal rather than to suppress or avoid, we move past the gross level. Next, we move to the second level of the spiral, the subtle level. Subtle purification can take a very long time, as the identification with thoughts, labels, and stories about ourselves can take decades to fully illuminate and become aware of. But as with the gross level, there are specific practices that stimulate this purification process and can help speed things up exponentially. Becoming aware of our thought patterns, identities, and stories around each blockage represents subtle purification. And then we can move to the third level of the Ascension spiral, called the causal level. As long as we have any distortions in our energy centers, they will continue to attract life experiences to us, which give us an opportunity to act with the opposite energy. And so your life experiences are the causal level of your blockages. And until you have the awareness to see these lessons coming at you, you will continue to repeat the same patterns of resistance and victimization which reinforce each blockage. This is what Ra calls in the Law of One, catalyst. So we could say that the awareness of life catalysts represents causal purification. And this is only possible after the first two levels of purification have happened. Because as long as we're identified with stories, beliefs, and emotions, we will continue to play the victim and justify our behaviors and spiral around and around, facing the same catalyst hundreds of times until something in us finally wakes up. So you can see that the spiral gets wider as we move higher, representing more awareness and expansion being gained. The tighter the spiral is, the lower the level and the less awareness we possess. We heal in spirals, not in lines. So we must have patience with ourselves, because it took us a long time to become so thoroughly blocked from our true nature. And so it stands to reason that it will also take some time for us to open back up. So there's a cursory overview of the first three levels of the Ascension spiral. But what about the fourth level? The Great-Causal level of the Ascension spiral is very different from the first three, in that it requires no effort or work on our behalf at all. Because once we have attained mastery over any blockage or pattern by transcending the gross, subtle, and causal levels of healing, we are essentially free from that blockage already. But this, however, does not mean that there may not still be some karmic inertia from that blockage or pattern from even past lives, or just the simple fact that a lot of us have entertained the same stories for 3 to 4 decades. So it stands to reason that it may take some time to slow down and empty that thought pattern of energy. Much like a ship turning its engine off and sailing through the ocean, it's going to take it some time to come to a full and complete stop, right? But once we have ascended to the Great-Causal level, and there is no more influence left from that thought pattern in our relationship to it, then every time it surfaces, we just witness it instantly and effortlessly. And there's no work needed beyond that to simply allow it to be transmuted naturally. So let's summarize this in a different way. We know that we're still at the gross level of healing when we're still feeling the painful emotions and triggers around that blockage. We know that we're still at the subtle level of healing when we're still thinking about the stories that have to do with that blockage. We know that we're still at the causal level of healing when our actions haven't changed yet, when our behavior patterns to certain life experiences haven't been transmuted from separation to love and surrender. The universe has to keep bringing us experiences to give us opportunities to change the way we're engaging with life. And we know that we are at the great causal level when we have no relationship whatsoever to any kind of feeling or pattern other than pure love and pure awareness. This is the fourth state, Turiya, and it represents the point where we have complete awareness of a pattern in our feelings, in our thoughts, and in our life experiences. We have absolutely no identification or interest in the stories anymore, and we've been passing the tests that life has been offering us. So if and when a small trace of some old pattern breezes through the mind, it's just seen like clouds passing through a clear blue sky. No problem at all. No suffering is generated. The witness quality within us has been so developed towards that blockage that the moment it arises, it is seen, observed in love and awareness, and let go of. No part of us is involved with that blockage or pattern any longer. That represents the fourth state of Turiya, or the great causal body, which is our true nature as pure, loving awareness. We are not our blockages. They are simply concentrations of negatively polarized energy within our nervous system, within our chakras. And they only survive because they've been given so much energy and attention from the mind. So this is why even after the causal level of healing has been transcended, little small, sticky remnants of energy may surface in the form of thoughts or feelings from time to time. But once we have mastered that energy, this doesn't have any sway over us or any ability to cause us to suffer at all. And this is what all sages will freely tell you, that every so often a feeling of anger or an old thought may arise in the mind of the sage. But it's like a thief in an empty house. There's nothing for it to steal. So the thief roams around, peruses through the drawers, finds that there's nothing there and nobody home, and simply exits the house of the energy centers and becomes pure cosmic energy once again. The nature of negative energy is magnetic or inward moving. So it has the tendency to accumulate and gather up and condense into what we call a blockage or a distortion. The nature of positive energy is radiant or outward moving. So it has the tendency of dispersing or opening energetic blockages. So healing is a depolarization process of negative energy. Until we are fully healed and crystallized in the positive polarity, our electromagnetic field will contain a mixture of positive and negative energies. This is also sometimes called the toroidal field or the auric field. And so this is why we spiral through healing in stages. Because like a vibration that moves up and down, consciousness heals this way as well. Because everything in the universe vibrates, or more accurately, spirals. And this is why it's called the Ascension spiral. Because on a two-dimensional perspective, vibration looks like this. But on a three-dimensional perspective, vibration looks like this. It's actually a spiral. Everything is spiraling. And so as we spiral through these dimensions of our being, we are quite literally accessing higher planes of consciousness, or higher planes of our own self. Consciousness raises to higher planes by forgetting the planes below it. or by releasing the energetic attachments to the lower planes. And so this is why we cannot ascend as long as we're stuck in old patterns and stories, because they keep our consciousness trapped on that plane. And so as we heal, we spiral upwards more and more, coming closer and closer to the perfected sixth density version of ourselves, the higher self. So every blockage that you heal, every catalyst that you meet, is actually a transition between planes or degrees of your higher self. When you heal, you are passing through the lower karmic planes of the higher self, actualizing more of your true nature and allowing the higher self to emerge a little bit more through your energy field. When you remove the blockages, the higher self naturally begins to shine forth. I call this higher self incarnation. Most people know it as enlightenment. So let's take a closer look at another map of the Ascension spiral, which is designed to be a simple view of what this process looks like from a two-dimensional perspective. As with the previous graph, the part of the spiral that's red represents our negative energy, and blue represents positive energy. We could call our negative energy our pain body. The pain body is comprised of our negative and unconscious shadow material, the areas of stagnant or blocked condensed energy that creates unhealthy electromagnetic fields which split and divide the energy field into compartments of positive and negative. And this splitting of our energies causes heat and friction within our energy field, because one of these two polarities naturally wants to absorb or push out the other. And so this constant pushing and pulling of the polarities gradually forces us to choose between one polarity or the other. So sometimes we are moving through the positively polarized areas of our energy field, and we don't notice our blockages, and everything seems to be going great. But eventually the negative will come back around and express itself, demanding energy and attention from you. So whenever we are accessing more joy, more love, awareness, or forgiveness, we are gaining more positive energy in our auric field. And then we bring that polarization with us when we spiral back around through the negative energies. As long as we have any negative energy in our auric field, it will always fight to depolarize the positive. But once we've gained some spiritual maturity, we know how to handle it. We begin to love the negative energy. We forgive it and we stop resisting it. And this depolarizes it into positive energy. So let's look at a practical example. Suppose that you have a blockage towards fear of abandonment from one of your parents leaving as a child. Depending on which level of the ascension spiral you are on, you must meet that energy in different ways. At the gross level, you must meet your negative emotions around the fear of abandonment with awareness and acceptance. You must see that emotion as a messenger that you have a blockage around the fear of abandonment. Full acceptance and awareness of this emotion allows you to spiral to a higher plane of the subtle level. At the subtle level, you must meet the thoughts and memories of your mind with forgiveness and detachment. Full awareness and acceptance of our thoughts and stories around this blockage spiral us upwards to the causal plane. And at the causal level, we meet our life circumstances with different actions. We lean in and surrender. We open our heart. We stop judging and resisting, and we start forgiving and accepting. Full awareness and acceptance of our life experiences in this area will move us upwards again to the great causal level, where total freedom is attained. So you can see that full healing requires you to make full use of every part of your true nature. And in this way, healing is nothing but an invitation to self-actualization. So we can also summarize the ascension spiral in this way. At the gross level are feelings. At the subtle level are thoughts. At the causal level are actions. And at the great causal level is pure loving awareness. So when we're at the bottom level, the spiral is really tight and small, which means things are moving too fast for us. We don't have much capacity to see or be aware of what's blocked within us. We're just barreling through life unconscious of our patterns and habits. So you may still feel negative emotions and thoughts at the causal or great causal levels. But the distinction is that the higher up we move up the ascension spiral, the wider it gets, which means the more capacity is gained to handle that energy and become aware of it. So our nervous system is forcing us to act out our blockages so that we can become aware of them and see what needs to be healed. And so the more awareness is gained of any blockage, the higher and wider up we move up the ascension spiral, and the less and less we suffer. In the Law of One, Ra says that we cannot do work in consciousness unless we have a charge, positive or negative. So a positively polarized being is looking to empty and clean their energy field of blockages as much as possible. But a negatively polarized being is looking to fill their energy field with as many distortions and blockages as they can. So only once we are polarized one way or the other, positive or negative, do real spiritual abilities and powers begin to manifest. And this is exactly how things work in basic biochemistry as well. Our cells and our nerves cannot perform any functions without an electrical polarity. We know that in our nerves, potential energy is stored in separate electrical charges of positive and negative, opposite polarities. And this is why the more split we are in our energy field, the more we suffer. Because we could say that suffering is the result of the friction, the rub between the positive and negative energies in our energy field, fighting for dominance. Once we are polarized one way or the other, the mind and the energy field become balanced. So really the whole point of third density is to choose a polarity and balance our energy field. Once we have truly chosen a polarity and balanced our energy field, we begin to gain a charge in consciousness to do work in consciousness. And this is why the choosing is the prerequisite to graduating from third density. Because in order to do work in any of the higher densities, 4 through 7, you have to have a charge first. And most people in third density have not chosen a polarity yet, or are not even aware that there is a choice between the opposites. They're moving through life with a completely split energy field, which causes tremendous suffering. Ra calls this the sinkhole of indifference. And this is because suffering only exists in the sinkhole of indifference. Once we become polarized, positive or negative, suffering comes to an end. It only exists here in third density. And you might say, wait a minute, you're saying that negatively polarized beings don't suffer either? And this is true. The negative being doesn't have the ability to suffer because it is completely blocked and cut off from reality. It feels nothing towards creation anymore. It is an impenetrable wall of blockages. And so it only thinks of itself, and it can't suffer from the thoughts or actions of others anymore. But it doesn't get to experience the pleasure and ecstasy of bliss and love that the positive does. The positive being sees everything as an aspect of itself and accepts it as the creator. And so there's nothing seen as outside of me anymore that can cause me pain. So this is the process of ascension that we are all currently on, to heal and transmute our negative energy through spiritual balancing until we become positively polarized and are eligible for third density graduation. That is what the ascension spiral is designed to help you facilitate. As I've said before, enlightenment is really just a natural state of consciousness that begins to manifest once the nervous system has been properly purified and prepared for it. Just like you cannot run new software on an old, outdated computer without first upgrading the hardware. Likewise, we must upgrade the hardware of our nervous system through gradual purification and opening of our energy channels. And fourth density consciousness then begins to manifest all on its own. I've mentioned before in a few videos that one of my biggest dreams is to create some kind of consciousness academy where we can specifically facilitate the expansion of human consciousness in a more academic setting. And so I have a really exciting announcement to bring you today before we close this video. I've been working for many months on building an online membership platform called 4D University that will have all of my courses under one umbrella and also be a sort of online community of light workers and spiritual adepts who are fully committed to the path of spiritual ascension. You can think of it as a virtual ashram and a virtual academy rolled into one, because we're going to have a standard curriculum to follow, beginning with my first masterclass called Master Your Mind, followed by a second course called Meditation Mastery. And then the third course in the curriculum is called 4DAP, which stands for Fourth Density Ascension Protocol. 4DAP is designed to be a hands-on training program for facilitating the inner transformation of the human nervous system. And so this is why 4D University will be a curriculum-based format with prerequisites you must take before jumping into a course like this. Because 4DAP is an advanced study program of integrated yoga practices, techniques, and metaphysical teachings designed to rapidly accelerate the process of inner purification, which we've been talking about today, as well as to facilitate the gradual awakening of fourth density energy within the nervous system, which most people know of as Kundalini. And so in coming episodes, we're going to talk a lot more about the science of Kundalini and the process of its safe and gradual awakening. But for those of you who are ready for fourth density ascension, I'm very happy to announce that I will now have a platform available to help facilitate your journey, along with thousands of other people all around the world. So I can't say much more than this yet, but as of right now, we plan to launch 4D University on July 1st. So if you'd like to get on the waiting list or stay updated, then you can enter your email address at the link in the show notes below, and we will keep you updated as we move closer to the launch date. So I hope that you've been inspired with a new comprehension of the healing process in this episode, that it is truly a science and an art form that can be learned and mastered. In our next episode, we're going to begin the discussion of one of the most important topics for increasing spiritual intelligence, and that is, of course, the science of Kundalini Awakening. There's a whole lot to look forward to, my friends, and I'm truly grateful to be sharing this ascension journey with all of you during this incredible time on this planet. So, namaste to you all, and I'll see you in our next episode.